You know that feeling when training camp is getting closer and you just want to know where this team really stands? That's exactly where we're at right now. We've finally got a much clearer picture of who's moving up, who's got work to do, and which position battles are starting to heat up. There are some really interesting developments across the roster, and a few of them could have a much bigger impact than people realize once the season gets underway. So let's get right into everything that's changed and what it could mean going forward. But first, make sure to hit the like button and tell me, how long have you been rooting for the Hawks? We have fans of all ages here, and that's fantastic. Now, Seattle's depth chart is finally starting to take shape after minicamp, and with training camp now less than a month away, the biggest picture coming into focus is not just who is leading each position group, but which players are quietly climbing the ladder and putting themselves in position to earn major roles when the season begins. The off-season has given coaches an extended look at the roster, and while several starting jobs already appear settled, there are still fascinating battles unfolding across nearly every unit. What makes this especially intriguing is that the roster now seems to have far more competition than uncertainty, creating an environment where nearly every practice could influence the final decisions. On offense, the transition to coordinator Brian Fleury has reportedly gone smoothly. The expectation is that Seattle will continue operating with a run-focused identity, while remaining willing to attack through the air whenever the situation demands it. Throughout OTAs and minicamp, both coaches and players have spoken positively about the system being installed. One noticeable trend is the expectation that Seattle could feature even more heavy personnel packages, including increased use of 13 personnel with 3 tight ends on the field. The reasoning is simple. The Seahawks possess enough talent at tight end to make those formations dangerous, while the league itself continues moving toward bigger offensive packages capable of creating difficult defensive matchups. The quarterback room appears straightforward at the top, but becomes much more interesting behind the starter. Sam Darnold clearly enters training camp as the unquestioned QB1. The real competition centers around the backup position. Drew Lock currently holds that role and has already earned significant trust within the organization during his previous time in Seattle. At the same time, rookie Jalen Milroe presents a completely different discussion. His value isn't based solely on whether he wins the backup job. Instead, Seattle appears interested in finding creative ways to use his athleticism, particularly near the goal line. Coaches have discussed utilizing him as a change-of-pace quarterback, capable of adding another running threat inside the red zone, creating an extra advantage in the running game without necessarily making him the primary backup quarterback. That unique role makes the quarterback room one of the more interesting storylines to monitor throughout training camp. Perhaps no offensive position carries more intrigue than the running back room. The situation has become especially important because Zach Charbonnet continues dealing with an injury, and expectations are that he may not be available for Week 1. That opens the door for several players to compete for meaningful touches early in the season. Jadarian Price, George Holani, and Emmanuel Wilson all appear firmly in the mix to handle significant responsibilities while Charbonnet recovers. Meanwhile, Kenny McIntosh finds himself needing a strong camp simply to remain in contention for a roster spot. Seattle also continues to value the fullback position, with Robbie Ouzts and Brady Russell expected to remain important pieces of the offense. More than almost any other position group, this backfield represents a genuine open competition. No player has truly separated himself because practices have not yet reached full contact conditions. Once the pads come on, every carry and every block will matter. The receiver room remains loaded with established contributors and intriguing young talent. Jaxon Smith-Njigba, Rashid Shaheed, and Cooper Kupp currently headline the group, while Jake Bobo, Torrey Horton, and Cody White continue providing additional depth. Among the players drawing considerable attention is Rashid Shaheed. After finally spending a full offseason working alongside Sam Darnold, expectations are growing that the chemistry between quarterback and receiver will improve significantly. During previous work together, timing occasionally appeared slightly off, with passes either sailing long or falling just short. A complete offseason together could eliminate those small issues and unlock considerably more explosive production. Torrey Horton is another receiver, creating excitement. Even during an abbreviated rookie season, he demonstrated an impressive ability to produce touchdowns whenever opportunities presented themselves. Despite appearing in only part of the season, Horton still managed multiple scoring plays, including an impact on special teams with a punt return touchdown. The key for him now becomes availability. If he remains healthy throughout the year, Seattle could possess another explosive weapon capable of stretching defenses every time he steps onto the field. The combination of established veterans and emerging young talent gives the Seahawks one of their deepest receiving groups heading into camp. The tight end room reflects another area where Seattle appears unusually confident. A.J. Barner now leads the group after developing far beyond early expectations. What once looked like a player projected primarily as a future TE2 has evolved into someone viewed among the better tight ends in the league. Behind him, Elijah Arroyo possesses tremendous upside as a receiving threat, although injuries interrupted parts of his previous season. If he can stay healthy, coaches clearly believe his ceiling remains extremely high. Eric Sober also continues providing valuable blocking ability, giving Seattle multiple skill sets within the same position group. That versatility fits perfectly with the anticipated increase in heavier offensive formations. One of the biggest changes compared to previous off-seasons is the conversation surrounding the offensive line. Rather than discussing major rebuilds or expensive free agent additions, Seattle enters camp returning essentially the same core group from last season. The primary question revolves around the right guard position, where Anthony Bradford currently appears positioned to open the season as the starter, despite continued debate among fans. Behind him, players like Richmond and Stevens remain candidates to eventually challenge for larger roles. There is also competition at swing tackle, with Jones and Hart battling for that valuable reserve position. Overall, however, confidence surrounding the offensive line is noticeably stronger than in recent years, with expectations that the unit can improve even after delivering what was viewed as an above-average performance last season. Defensively, coordinator Aiden Durde continues earning praise despite Mike Macdonald calling the defensive plays. Durde plays a major role in constructing weekly game plans, developing players, and preparing the defense for each opponent. Reports coming out of minicamp suggest the defense consistently outperformed the offense, generating numerous positive plays throughout practices. The praise surrounding Durde has become so strong that there is already speculation he could become a head coaching candidate in the future if this defensive success continues. Along the interior defensive line, Seattle appears loaded with both established veterans and promising young talent. Leonard Williams, Byron Murphy, and Jaron Reed remain the foundation of the group, but Brandon Piley, Cameron Young, Morris, and Riley Mills are all names generating additional interest. Riley Mills, in particular, is viewed as a player with significant upside if he can remain healthy throughout the season. Considering how productive the defensive line already proved to be last year, adding another healthy contributor could elevate one of the team's greatest strengths even further. The edge rusher group presents a fascinating blend of experienced veterans and younger players hoping to assume larger responsibilities. DeMarcus Lawrence, Uchenna Nwosu, and Dante Fowler Jr. provide proven production, but Seattle also recognizes the importance of developing the next generation. Derek Hall represents one of the younger defenders expected to compete for a bigger role. and the organization knows it eventually must replace some of its veteran pass rushers. Training camp will provide a critical opportunity to determine whether those younger players are ready to take that next step. At linebacker, Ernest Jones, Drake Thomas, and Tyrese Knight headline what is viewed as one of the league's more underrated position groups. Their versatility gives Seattle confidence in multiple defensive situations, while the competition for the fourth linebacker spot will likely be determined largely through special teams' performance. The secondary also features several compelling battles. Devin Witherspoon and Josh Jobe appear set as the primary outside cornerbacks, while the competition for the third cornerback role remains wide open. Julian Neal, Noah Igbinoghene, and Nehemiah Pritchett all have opportunities to earn significant snaps, while former wide receiver Tyron Broden remains an intriguing developmental project after transitioning to cornerback. His size and athletic profile make him one of the more unique players to watch throughout camp. At safety, Julian Love anchors the position, but the battle alongside him remains unresolved. Okada and Bud Clark both have realistic opportunities to secure meaningful playing time, and there's even a possibility both defenders could see the field together, depending on defensive packages. That competition adds another layer of intrigue to an already talented defense. Special teams may quietly remain one of Seattle's greatest strengths. Jason Myers, Michael Dixon, and Chris Stoll continue providing stability as the kicking specialists, while Rashid Shaheed and Torrey Horton are both expected to contribute in the return game. Their explosiveness gives Seattle multiple dangerous options capable of changing field position whenever the ball is in their hands. As training camp approaches, Seattle appears to have far fewer glaring weaknesses than in previous years. Instead, the focus has shifted toward internal competition, player development, and determining which emerging talents can transform promising depth into meaningful production once the regular season begins. What do you think will be the most important position battle to watch during Seahawks training camp? And which player do you believe has the best chance to surprise everyone this season? Another important takeaway from minicamp is that many of Seattle's projected starters are no longer fighting to prove they belong on the roster. Instead, the battles are happening behind them, where every practice rep could determine who earns meaningful snaps during the regular season. That changes the entire dynamic heading into training camp. Instead of wondering whether the Seahawks have enough talent, the bigger question is which players will separate themselves from the rest of an increasingly competitive roster. The defensive front perfectly illustrates that reality. Leonard Williams, Byron Murphy, and Jarran Reed already provide a strong foundation on the interior. But the conversation doesn't stop there. Brandon Peely continues to earn attention, Morris remains part of the rotation, and Riley Mills has put himself in position to become one of the more interesting young players on the roster. The belief is that if Mills can stay healthy throughout the season, his development could give Seattle another impact contributor inside. Considering how productive the defensive line already was, adding another reliable piece only increases the overall strength of the unit. The edge position presents a different kind of challenge. Veterans such as DeMarcus Lawrence, Uchenna Nwosu, and Dante Fowler Jr. bring experience and proven production. But Seattle also understands that younger players must eventually assume larger responsibilities. Derek Hall represents one of the names to watch as the organization looks toward the future. Training camp becomes the perfect opportunity to see whether the next generation is ready to handle a larger workload, or whether the position will require even more attention moving forward. The linebacker group may not receive as much national attention, but internally it appears to be one of the roster's strongest units. Ernest Jones, Drake Thomas, and Tyrese Knight provide versatility across the defense, giving the coaching staff confidence regardless of the situation. Behind them, the competition for another roster spot could ultimately come down to special teams value. Those are often the toughest battles during camp because players know every tackle, every coverage rep, and every special teams snap can make the difference between making the team or searching for another opportunity elsewhere. The secondary continues to feature some of the most intriguing competitions on the roster. Devin Witherspoon and Josh Jobe appear firmly established, but the race for additional playing time remains completely open. Noah Igbinoghene has reportedly positioned himself well during OTAs and minicamp, while Julian Neal and Nehemiah Pritchett are also competing for opportunities. Every practice during training camp will provide another chance for those players to climb the depth chart. One of the more fascinating long-term projects involves Tyron Broden. His transition from wide receiver to cornerback naturally requires patience, but his size and athletic profile make him someone worth watching closely. The expectation isn't necessarily that he immediately becomes a major contributor, but his progress throughout camp could determine how quickly that developmental project begins paying off. At safety, Julian Love provides stability, yet the competition beside him remains one of the more compelling defensive storylines. Okada brings experience, while Bud Clark offers youth and developmental upside. Rather than viewing the battle as one player winning and the other disappearing, there's a realistic possibility both defenders carve out important roles depending on personnel packages. That kind of depth becomes increasingly valuable over the course of a long season. Special teams also deserve attention because Seattle continues placing significant importance on that phase of the game. Jason Myers, Michael Dixon, and Chris Stoll return as the core specialists, giving the team continuity in kicking, punting, and long snapping. In the return game, Rashid Shaheed is expected to handle both punts and kickoffs, while Torrey Horton could also receive opportunities if healthy. Having multiple explosive return options allows Seattle to manage workloads while still creating opportunities for game-changing plays. Looking at the roster as a whole, one theme continues appearing over and over again. The Seahawks are entering training camp with competition instead of desperation. The quarterback hierarchy is established, but the backup role remains interesting. The running back room is filled with players competing for early season opportunities. The receivers have a blend of proven production and emerging talent. The tight ends appear well suited for heavier offensive formations. The offensive line enters camp with far fewer concerns than in previous years. Defensively, nearly every position group combines experienced veterans with younger players pushing for larger roles. Minicamp didn't answer every question, but it did provide a much clearer picture of where the roster stands before the pads come on. Training camp will ultimately determine who converts off-season momentum into regular season playing time, and several of the position battles remain completely open despite the progress already made. If you enjoyed this breakdown and want to stay updated with every Seahawks roster battle, training camp development, and breaking news as it happens, make sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a like on the video, and don't forget to click the video that's on your screen next. That's where you'll find more Seahawks coverage and the latest updates first. Go Hawks!